Hola, buen dia. It's me, Peppermint. And when I'm not on RuPaul's Drag Race or simply being New York City's sweetest diva, I'm tuned into the fabulously empowering Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice Power Hour, coming to you every weeknight at 7 p.m. live from our good old friends at the BRCSJ Virtual HQ via their Facebook page. Tune in tonight.
Need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.
Social justice, power hour, power hour, power hour. Social justice, power hour, power hour, power hour.
Good evening to our friends on the East Coast, good afternoon to our friends in the West, and good in-between time to our friends in those in-between spaces. Welcome, 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 my friends. Welcome to the Social Justice Power Hour. Welcome to the virtual headquarters of the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice. My name is Robert the Schreiber. I'm your host for this evening, as I have been for the past year and 8 months already. Over 400 some odd shows, many of them very odd indeed. Can't stop, won't stop. We've been coming at you every freaking weeknight since the pandemic started. We haven't missed a night. And we're thrilled about tonight especially. Dave Zirin is here from The Nation magazine, The Kaepernick Effect. We're so incredibly psyched to have him with us. So, gosh, get ready for some community building conversation. Sports not my specialty, but resistance is. So we're going to be chopping it up. Dave's going to teach me some things about a whole bunch of stuff. And I know that he brought a lot of friends and followers and readers and fam to our yard. So as I said at the outset, we are here 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. So to entice you to come back and join us again here in the Power Hour, I want to share, before we bring Dave on, some highlights, just some highlights, my friends, of things that are coming up on the Power Hour that you can look forward to, and hopefully you'll come back and share more virtual communion with us, because we do this every single freaking weeknight, and we want you here with us. We are here for you. Please be here with us. So, coming up on the Power Hour, Queer Yoga. We do this every Tuesday night, have done it every Tuesday night since the pandemic started as well. Queer Yoga Master brings us to virtual nirvana. Come take a breath with us, both literally and figuratively. And gosh, by the way, Wednesday, my birthday. I'll be 52 years old. I'm giving myself the gift of sharing an incredible conversation, as always, with the inspirational OG radical of the real Adam Gopnik, folks. Don't miss that one. And then on Friday, we're doing a huge, they're throwing me a little party at the Power Hour. We're going to have some incredible folks stopping by, sharing some birthday wishes, some songs, some poems, some readings, some shout outs. It's going to be, I have to say, we've gotten a couple of videos in and I've already cried like 17 times. So come by and catch a really fabulous show and see me cry a little bit. Why not, right? And then we're doing Throwback Thursdays. As I said, we've done 400 some odd shows. We've had incredible, extraordinary folks drop by. So we're bringing back Throwback Thursdays, some meaningful moments from our history. Minda Harts, poet Maggie Smith, and of course, author Kwame Alexander. Just some of the wonderful folks. Call and response. The story of Black Lives Matter. Veronica Chambers is going to be here. Chop it up, everybody. And the pain gap, how sexism, racism in healthcare kill women. Anousheh Hussain is going to be here. I'm thrilled about this conversation, an important topic we have not covered enough here in the Power Hour. And also thrilled about this, everybody. Keisha Blaine, Dr. Keisha Blaine is going to be here. Until I Am Free, Fannie Lou Hamer's Enduring Message to America. That's going to be an important conversation. And Jill Sobule was just out here in Princeton, New Jersey. As many of you know, we lost our home, our safe space during the pandemic. And and we're looking to find a new space to gather community. Jill came all the way out from California to do a show here as a benefit, and we're going to replay that show for y'all here in the Power Hour, so you get to see Jill live. It was pretty magical. And speaking of live, here is a real live event. You can join us in real live community, safe and smart, masked and vaxxed. Come out and see Wesley Stace live in concert November 12th. His only area appearance, doing his late style thing. He just came out with his incredible album. His whole band's coming out. So come out. All proceeds go toward finding us a new home here in Princeton or Central Jersey, or wherever we may end up. So please buy your tickets early, buy them often. We are going to sell out just like we do with Jill. So make sure you're here for this really fabulous show. And that's just some of the highlights, my friends. Just some of the highlights that are coming up here on the Power Hour. But that's not why you called tonight. You came out to see an extraordinary show you're going to get. Named one of Utne Reader's 50 visionaries who are changing our world. Dave writes about the politics of sports for The Nation magazine. Indeed, their first sports editor in 150 years of existence. He's a regular columnist for the progressive, hosts the popular weekly podcast Edge of Sports Radio. He's also the author of 10, count them, 10 books on the politics of sports, including his latest and greatest, The Kaepernick Effect, Taking a Knee, Changing the World. As our friend Dr. Cornel West says, Brother Dave is the finest, most important writer on sports and politics in America. So who better, my friend, to chop it up tonight about all that is going on, both on the field and off. So please, my friend, join me in welcoming to our Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice, our new friend, Dave Zirin. I didn't get that right at all. Please tell me, my friend, first and foremost, pronounce your name for our audience, because I just butchered the fuck out of it.
Yeah, it's Dave Zirin, and it's totally okay. I think my mom mispronounces it sometimes. It's just one of those things. I've been correcting people since birth. It's all good.
No, names are important here at the center. Very important, in fact. So Dave Zirin, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, it's great to be here. And, you had me at Bayard Rustin when you asked me to come on, because something I always tell folks when we talk about Rustin that I think people leave out is he might be the best mass organizer in the history that the United States has ever produced. Like the ability to summon, gather, and organize hundreds of thousands of people in a singular space, which I think is very needed in this day and age, so the people can be heard. And I think there's so much to learn from Rustin, and it's an honor to be here with you.
I appreciate you raising his name. This is why we opened the center. We started this. This was my dream. To bring Bayard Rustin's name back to the forefront. Now the Obamas are producing a movie with the great Coleman Domingo starring. We're thrilled about that. Anything that brings his name to people's ears so people can see and understand and learn, right? And learn from what he did, because he organized the march, and he did, there was a time when we started the center, every day I'd learn something new about this cat, and from organizing the march to literally bring nonviolence to Martin Luther King's door. The next day, Martin Luther King threw out his guns. He brought the peace symbol to America. It's incredible. So thank you for starting us off with that inspiration. We appreciate you saying so. And that means a lot coming from you, because you brought sports to The Nation magazine, which was pretty incredible there. I want to talk about that. There's so much I want to talk to you about. I feel like we need a power 2 hours. So let's get right to it. I think that this is such an important way to communicate to people, to find these connections between politics, organizing, activism, and the things that we often take for granted that they are so much a part of, like sports. So there's been so much in the news just this past week that is so important for us to talk about. But I don't want to lose sight of this incredible book. So let's first bring this up so everybody can see it. The Kaepernick Effect, Taking a Knee, Changing the World. This is the book we'll be talking about tonight on and off, but we're going to, obviously, with the two of us, I know, because I've seen you before and folks know me, verbosity is something that's not lost on me. Brevity is not the soul of my wit. So there'll be a lot of avenues we'll explore, but we're going to try to keep a lot of the attention to this book because this book is phenomenal and people should read it and own it. And there'll be a link in the comments section to our bookshop.org. So people can go buy the book and they can do it while we're talking. You don't have to leave this conversation. You can buy the book, pop the link in, come back, listen to us chat, listen to us jabber on, and you'll really enjoy the book as much as you enjoy this conversation. So if you know Dave's work, you know you want the book. And if you're not familiar because you've been living under a rock and you don't know Dave, tonight will inspire you to buy this book. So let's start, if you don't mind, because personal journeys always really interest me. What's the secret origin? Where did you start being interested in this intersectionality of sports and politics?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was in college and I was an absolute politics head. And when I say politics head, I'm talking social protest, building occupations. I mean, whatever it took, change by any means necessary. And on the side, I was a sports obsessive. Like, I loved sports. I grew up playing sports. I had statistics memorized. I mean, I would go to occupy a board of trustees meeting and then go protest at a police station, and then I would go to a sports trivia contest at a bar. But at the sports trivia contest, I would usually go by myself and sort of hiding a little bit, as if liking sports was somehow antithetical to my leftism and my believing in resistance politics, my belief. And I'll tell you, I never thought about the two intersecting at all until it intersected in the real world. Like, there was a basketball player while I was in school named Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, who played for the Denver Nuggets. And Rauf made the private decision that he wasn't going to come out for the national anthem. And when he was asked why, a reporter got wind of it and said to him, don't you realize that flag is a symbol of freedom and democracy throughout the world? And Rauf responded, well, it may be a symbol of freedom and democracy to some, but it's a symbol of oppression and tyranny to others. And when he said that, the sporting shit hit the fan. I mean, this is the mid-90s. There was no Black Lives Matter movement. There were a few movements to speak of, certainly none that dealt with this issue. And people started attacking Rauf left and right, but I was riveted. Like, I couldn't believe this athlete playing this sport, basketball, which I loved with all my heart, was also out there raising questions about U.S. imperialism and foreign policy. I mean, it was absolutely riveting to me. And, this is the days before the internet and everybody being wired to their phones. So it was very much a communal experience, because I would make sure I was watching ESPN Sports Center every day at 7 p.m. I had to be in the dorm lounge to see the latest with Rauf, and there would be other people there. And ESPN was like, Rauf spits on the flag, booyah, dan-an-it, dan-an-it. And you're just playing that up. And I remember watching it and talking with a bunch of other fellow students and hearing one of the announcers on TV say, well, Rauf must see himself in the tradition of those activist athletes like Tommy Smith and John Carlos or Muhammad Ali or Billie Jean King. And when I heard that blew my mind, because I was like, what? Activist athletes? I thought I knew so much about sports. I don't know anything. So, I couldn't just Google activist athletes. I had to actually do some research, because I now had this taste in my mouth for wanting to know this history. So I had to, get in the microfiche and read about this amazing history of the way that sports has always not only reflected our politics, but also shaped our politics. And that's why you can't think of the civil rights movement without thinking of someone like Jackie Robinson, or the 1960s without thinking of Muhammad Ali, or either the women's movement and the LGBTQ movement without thinking of people like Billie Jean King and Martina Navratilova, and so many heroes and sheroes in that world. And, this entire history came alive for me in this really tangible way. And it was at that moment where I really said to myself, I want to explore this for my life. I want to figure out how to do this for my life. So, I started getting jobs at newspapers, and I always said, look, I'll sell ads for your paper. I'll clean the floors, but I want a little bit of space each week so I can write my little sports and politics column. And that was almost 20 years ago. And I've been doing it ever since.
What a journey. I want to, there are a couple of things I want to pull at on that. One that is personal, and then one that is, I want to go through the history a bit of activism in and of itself in sports. But first, you said something that was fascinating to me in the early part of your story, where you said you were embarrassed or reluctant to talk about your politics as you talk about sports or as you watch sports. And that I have that same reluctance, like until I've done this show and had people like Jonathan Igon and talk about Muhammad Ali, and different sports figures in our history who have made a huge difference in our world. But before that, I was of the same mindset. Like, sports is not our arena, both literally and figuratively, right? That is something that the right wing or that people who don't share my views or my politics enjoy, and I do not. So why is that perception so strong? Because there's obviously a huge thread of activism, of organizing, of all different kinds of mindsets within sports itself.
Well, one reason is that the right wing and the nationalists in particular, they issued the first patent on sports at the end of the 19th century, and they baked that into the cake of sports. But also baked into the cake of sports was resistance. So this political battle's been going on since the 19th century. I mean, when you read about how organized sports, how the business of sports was first marketed to the American people, it was all tied up in nationalism, all tied up in this idea of sports being the way that we would train a new generation of leaders, white male leaders, for the American century that would be the 20th century. So the U.S. would dominate the world in the 20th century, and sports would be the training ground by which they would do it. A very, very right-wing idea, of course, imperial fantasy stuff. And also tied up in that mythology of sports was this myth of inclusion. They said this very explicitly, that sports was like America. Sports is a level playing field, and anyone who tries hard enough can make it. That's the myth of meritocracy, the myth of inclusion that exists in sports. But while there was this myth of inclusion baked into sports, there was also this reality of exclusion baked into sports. And that exclusion meant women not playing. LGBTQ people, forget about it. There was no space for you in the 19th century to say, I want to be an athlete and this is who I am. And certainly for Black and brown folks, it was like, make your own leagues over there with no money, no resources. And, you're not going to be on the big show or on the big stage. So throughout the history of sports, you have this fight for inclusion, the fight to play, the fight to be a part of the game. And in that fight, you see these incredible arenas of resistance. Now, part of the problem is that we're not taught that when we're taught our sports history or when we watch sports games. But what we do see, and I was at a football game yesterday, is you see things like fighter planes flying overhead, or an American flag so big it's practically could swallow up the stadium in and of itself. And so that's the messages that are pumped through sports. Not to mention, sexism, homophobia, racism, that all of this exists in the arena of sports. But there is also this counter history. I mean, how else to explain something, and I'm talking about sports here, that's given us some really notorious right-wing figures over the years, like George Steinbrenner, the former owner of the New York Yankees, but it's also given us people like Muhammad Ali and Billie Jean King. So you do have these two traditions in sports that come together. And what I always argue with fellow travelers in the fight for a better world, I always say, don't reject sports, reclaim it. Because sports and play is part of what makes us human beings. And we would never, ever, ever reject other cultural commodities in our system outright. There's a lot of backwards, fucked up shit in music. We don't say all music is terrible and we'll never listen to music again. There's a lot of screwed up movies out there. We never say, oh, movies are an instrument of right-wing rule. But we do say that about sports. And I think it's an area of blindness that we've started to overcome over the last 10 years, last 5 years in particular, where, I think more and more people are realizing, like in the wake of Colin Kaepernick and the WNBA and all sorts of other issues that have popped off in the last 5 years, that people realize that, yeah, you do have to know what's going on in the sports world to know what's going on in larger spheres of resistance.
Yeah, it's also, it also deals with teenagers and kids too. And as we see, transgender athletes being excluded or being even demonized, and kids, mostly kids we're talking about, and you have wonderful documentaries like Changing the Game that are trying to bring voice and amplify the difficulties faced by our transgender youth in sports. But again, it's that narrative that we all, and myself, we all take on and have a strong belief in. But you're right, there's been a thread of resistance throughout.
Yeah.
There's also been this thread of, as you said, when there's inclusion, there's that much more exclusion that happens, and almost more voracious when someone like Jackie Robinson, joins the major leagues, or when Black athletes of color become dominant in a sport. But then the way that that's explained by folks who have difficulty is by talking about stereotypes of how physiology works and how bodies work. And I was wondering if you could speak onto that, because I think that's something that also will allow our audience, those of us who don't embrace sports because of what you said, are losing out because of that. That narrative is something that's always kept us feeling like we can't allow ourselves to enjoy it.
And it's a tragedy. I mean, because, what's more joyous than play? What's more joyous than games? And from an anthropological perspective, we know that, as far as early humans, as soon as they could clothe themselves and shelter themselves, they created games to play with one another. And those games reflected their societies, just as our games reflect our society. And I think in a more just society, the games would be more just and more inclusive. And I think you talk about the myth of inclusion, the reality of exclusion. Here's a statistic. Between 60 and 70% of youth athletes quit by the time they're 13. I mean, what an indictment of sports, and what an understandable reason why, if we understand why so many left-wing rebels, reject sports, it's because for a lot of them, their first act of rebellion was telling mom or telling dad or telling their guardian, like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's too competitive. It's too gross. The coach is a dick. I don't like not being with my friends who don't play. I don't want to do this. Too much pressure. I'm a kid. I don't want to play games that are overseen by adults who are acting out their own macho fantasies. Like, there's so much that's toxic in sports that I think the best of us respond to in this very visceral way. I think part of what I try to say is that sports don't have to be that way. And the same reason why you loved sports when you were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 should be the same reason why people get to keep playing sports into their teens, their 20s, their 30s, because it's a site of community, it's a site of healthy competition, and it's the site of, heaven forbid, fun. And this myth that you have to somehow be good at it, that's actually not a myth. It's a tragedy of our society, I would say, that you have to somehow be really good at it to play. And if you're not really good, then your only role in the sports project is to watch. I mean, that's ridiculous. Our society over the last 130 years, 140 years, is the first society in human history that divided people in terms of those who play and those who watch. Like, the idea of the permanent spectator is a function of our modern society. And I think that's terrible. But once again, it's like the fight should be to reclaim what's there, not to reject what's there. And so it's like, there's racism in sports. Yes, then we should have anti-racist movements inside of sports to fight against it, as opposed to rejecting it altogether, because then what you're doing also is you're ceding that cultural battleground to just be a foghorn of racism, to use that as one example. You want to be in the fray fighting. to make sure it's less racist, and to fight racism as it comes up, because not just because we should fight racism wherever it rears its ugly head, but also because we have to understand how powerful the cultural foghorn is that is sports. So we have to be cognizant of what kind of messages it's actually giving off. And I would much rather have sports give off a message of, rebel athletes who are using the platform that they built with their skill and their genius to speak out about the ills of the world, than a sports world that's a site of unthinking warmongering and nationalism.
You just really brought something to the forefront that I hadn't even considered. I was looking so much forward to this conversation because there's so much in professional sports that is problematic, and I know that you've dissected this so much that there's literally no one better to speak onto it. No, and that's the truth. I mean, if Brother Cornel West says it, then you have to allow it, right? But to bring up this idea of the actual origin of all of this is our youth. And it brought me back. I thought about picking flowers in right field when I was playing softball and how much I absolutely hated it. And it wasn't until some 40 years later when I was able to embrace my athleticism again, when my wife taught me to box. And now I have a 100-pound bag upstairs that I love to hit. And I love the sweet science of it. I love, right? And but it took me 40 years to find that. So I love this idea that you brought to us tonight of how do we reclaim not only professional sports, but our own youth, our own childhood, and for others, that sports doesn't have to be this competitive, ugly, masculine, hormone-injected battlefield. It can be something that we can enjoy because it is, as you said, and I love this, it's about play.
Yeah, it's got to be about play. I mean, and I'm a rec coach. In addition to doing this writing stuff, I coach basketball for 13 and 14 years old. And the thing I always put in my head, like I think about all the time, are the words of this amazing former Baltimore Colt named Joe Ehrman, who does coaching seminars. And he always says there are two kinds of coaches, the transactional and the transformational. The transactional coach, which is the vast majority of youth and professional coaches, are people who are really, frankly, in it for how it makes them feel, who are in it for their own sense of self-gratification. And if that means getting kids to quit because they're not, working hard enough for the team, and so be it, then that's what you're going to do because you're a transactional coach. It's about you. A transformational coach is somebody who it's about the youth. It's about them. It's about how they're developing. It's about how they're thinking. I always say to my kids, it's like that I coach, I always say the goal is never about winning or losing. The goal is achieving a kind of perfection and satisfaction from going through the process. And if you are living that life of where you're actually trying to master it as a craft, then the winning will come. And if it doesn't, well, then the losing will come. But so what? Because neither of those things are what we're trying to get towards as we go through this process of playing on a team. And I gotta be also very honest here. It's like it's the pull because of our society and how, because we talk about sports being so, filled with isms and being so cutthroat and all the rest of it. That's because it reflects our world. I mean, it's like we think sports is bad. Woo, like Wall Street, even worse. Or, ooh, ask those John Deere workers out on strike by the thousands, like how cutthroat their industry is. I mean, that's just a reflection of our society. Sports is just like the biggest platform that we're seeing this played out in on the cultural firmament. And I got to tell you, though, that means that I have to check myself constantly when I'm coaching these young people, because it's all nice and good to say winning doesn't matter. But when it's a tie score with 2 minutes left and I have to decide whether I'm going to let the kid play who hasn't really played that much that game, or I'm going to keep the best player in for an extra couple of minutes, I have to take a deep breath and check myself and say, no, it's about giving everybody the experience on the court, not just about winning. but the pull is there, no question, because I know, like, when you win, you get the parents slapping you on the back, you get the good feelings, you get the kids who are caught up in the competition being like, yeah coach, but it can't be about that. It has to be about play, community, and feeling good. And I just I always in my own head, like, make myself think about this time. My own son is a very I think he's a very talented basketball player. He just is, and he was on a team that was a year older than he was, and we went to a game that was 45 minutes from home and play. And we were driving home, and he was in tears, and he said, I just wanted to step on the court for 30 seconds so I could know what it felt like. And I carry that with me, his sadness at that moment, because it's got to be about the kids. And I think if we want to create a different kind of world, I think that's part of how we teach young people. Because, if they feel like they're in a collaborative environment where they can depend upon the people around them, that they're going to take those lessons into adulthood and not be like some sort of cutthroat, bastard who's trying to keep the system on its feet, and instead be the kind of person who's trying to fight for a more just world.
I know we've taken a bit of a left turn here, or more to the point, we're out in left field right now. But I'm fascinated by this. So do you mind if we explore this a little more? Because
Of course.
what you're saying is a beautiful thing, and I would love that to be the ideal. But there has to be some acknowledgement of the competitive nature. And and again, you've delineated, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and then into teenage. When do we allow it to become competitive, and how do we ease into that, and how do we make it work? Because at some point, winning does matter. I watched Ted Lasso, and I want everything to be that way, that winning is not most important. It's teamwork and growing together as a family, as a community. But that's not the case for professionals. That's not the case for college. And it's not really the case for high school, because there are consequences.
Yeah, lower too. Youth sports as well has become so highly professionalized. I mean, they rate best fifth graders in the state in basketball where I live. I mean, that's quasi abusive to me, that you would rate a kid like that. I knew of one mother whose child was one of the top rated fifth graders in the state of Maryland, and she told the coach, if you tell my son he's on any of these lists, we're quitting the team, because I think that's actually toxic for him to know this and know he's being watched by adults and ranked and peered over and poured over and all the rest of it. No, you're right. The nature of these, that's part of the problem, is that all of the sports world is transactional as opposed to transformational. And so it's like individual coaches need to work hard against that and try to fight against it. But it has to be done consciously, and it needs to be done with a movement mindset that is related to this idea of trying to reclaim sports and change sports. And these efforts have tried to happen over the years, but it's very difficult. Sometimes it could feel like shoveling sand in the ocean, precisely because if you're a coach who just makes people feel good about playing, but you lose, certainly at the collegiate or professional level, and even at the high school level in some places, you're going to get fired. So the very nature of the job requires some of the worst attributes of sports to bubble up to the surface. So I just think that, like, we need to be engaged in sports at the youth level on one hand, and also be engaged in social movements, because these movements actually change sports. Like Colin Kaepernick took that knee not in a vacuum, but because there was a Black Lives Matter movement. Billie Jean King raised the banner of women's liberation because there was a women's liberation movement. Athletes have come out of the closet at a much slower pace than people in the general society, but the whole reason, because of homophobia in sports, but the whole reason why we've seen more of it anyway over the last decade is precisely because of the brave movement that's existed off the field or off the court. So if we want to see a more just sports world, we need to fight for a more just world, because I don't think it's going to happen in a vacuum. Although I do also still think that good people involving themselves in youth sports is a critical part of the equation.
There's so many things that need to be done sometimes, and I think of someone like you who stands at the apex of this movement of sports and activism, or at least reporting on it and being a voice for it. It must be dizzying sometimes because there's so many highs and lows. You see something one day that inspires you to the very core of your being, and then you deal with this past week and what we've uncovered, and that must be so dismaying. And knowing that it is obviously just the very, very, very tip of a very deep and horrible iceberg.
Well, I think you're probably talking about those NFL emails.
Yeah.
Is that what you're in reference to? And but something like this, where a couple of select emails get released that reveal the racist, sexist, and homophobic rot that exists at the very top levels of the National Football League, which is the most powerful sport, both financially and culturally, that we have in this country, and reinforces so many awful ideas. It's something like, I'm not disheartened when that happens, because I view it as a chance to really reveal the rot, because I don't think we can change any of this until we look honestly at what it is. And the National Football League likes to put forward this slogan that football is family. And, they try to cover up things like concussions, for example, or violence against women that exists amongst the families of players. And by the way, there is a causal connection between concussions and violence inside the family. Not that a concussion is a prerequisite to have violence in the family, not by a long shot. We know that there are lawyers who are abusive to their family members, doctors, it exists across society. But studies showed that post-concussive syndrome, some of the factors are memory loss, irritability, bouts of anger, temper. I mean, these things are intrinsically tied together in a very ugly way. The NFL has also, over the last year, put anti-racist slogans on the field. Things like "End Racism." Players are allowed to have decals that say "Black Lives Matter" on their helmets. And it's all pure, unadulterated horseshit. I mean, it's an effort to market themselves really to a young generation that's more demographically diverse than any generation in the history of the United States, and less tolerant of intolerance than any generation in the history of the United States. And they realize that if they don't connect with that, even if they piss off some right wingers by, having some of these slogans, it's like they also understand that it's better to have a couple of pissed off olds than push away a generation of young people who are looking at things in a different way and through a different kind of lens. So, that's the lay of the land. And I think that we would do well to see these moments like this last week where the emails get revealed as a way. I mean, I view it as a very, very juicy, fecund moment to expose what it is about the NFL that is in fact so rotten. So for me, when I saw those emails come out, like, less sort of dismay and more, okay, we've read about 10 emails. Where are the other 649,990? And what do they say? That's next on the agenda.
But that's the whole thing, next on the agenda, right? So all throughout, starting with George Floyd's murder and last summer, and all the rallies and the protests and the organized move, there was all this talk of, we have to be careful. We have to take great care in this not just being a moment, but making sure it's a movement. So the same question now lies in front of us with this. How do we make this not a moment where we uncover these 10 emails, but as you said, we find the other 649,990? How do we expose it all to make sure that we carry it forth? So a month from now, we're still having this conversation, because it's not going to be as juicy. It's not going to be as salacious. People will have tired of it, and they'll just want to watch sports. Don't bother me while I'm watching my sports. This is how I relax.
Mm-hmm. And, relaxation in such a brutal, unfeeling world can feel like precious, precious water in a desert for so many people, which is why sometimes they recoil when you bring up these political issues in sports, because they want it to be this safe space. But that they're, as Colin Kaepernick taking a knee and the thousands of others who've taken a knee are trying to communicate, there really is no safe space from racism if you're Black and brown, and and they want white fans to have to reckon with that and reckon with the fact that their world is different. I had one person I interviewed for the Kaepernick Effect, which I should just say is a book filled with stories of young people who took a knee during the anthem and how it affected their lives. One of the things that they said to me over and over again was, several people had some iteration of this, saying, if me taking a knee makes you uncomfortable for 2 minutes, then you have a little window into how I feel every day. And that's a powerful and, to me, unassailable statement. So it's like there are people in my family who say, well, I just want sports to be sports. And I mean, it's one of the arguments I say to them is like, I would give anything for sports to exist a la carte, apart from politics, like something that could just be fun and something that we just enjoy. But that's just not the world that we're living in. You have to look at this world objectively in the face, as far as the experiences that people have to go through to survive on a daily basis. And so this is a very different kind of world than the kind of world where we can afford to just say, oh, I've got my games and nothing else in the outside world dare intrude upon them.
And it's an absolutely false narrative, because we're not creating an issue. We're not saying, hey, this wasn't here before. Look what we're bringing. Look what we're creating. No, this is something that is there. And we're just saying, you need to reckon with it. You need to just be able to be open to it. And you can still enjoy it. And you can enjoy it even more, probably. That's the other side of it. I believe that once we get to the other side, that everybody who is tentative or scared of what they're going to lose will actually end up enjoying it more, because it'll be more inclusive and I dare say, and this is a word we don't use enough on our side of things, wholesome experience.
Yeah, I agree. Great word, Joyce, for this as well. In the best sense of that word too, like of thinking about a holistic kind of experience. I've been asked on several, I'm so glad the way you phrased what you just said, because I've been asked on several shows about like, why do you think Colin Kaepernick chose to polarize this country? Like variations of that question. And I always shoot right back like, well, wait a minute. Colin Kaepernick didn't polarize this country. Racism and inequality polarized this country. To slam him for pointing it out is like calling someone an arsonist because they say, hey, look, there's a fire in that building. I mean, he's trying to call our attention to deep, deep, deep societal woes, as are the many, many dozens of people who I interviewed for the book. Like, they're trying to start conversations in their communities by taking a knee during the anthem. That's their goal. They want to be able to have people speak about and understand what they're going through. And specifically, a lot, they're talking about white people, like the white majority, like actually seeing them, like them not being consigned to invisibility or their issues, but to actually see what racism is, how pernicious it is, and what people go through to survive in this country. And a lot of people, it's interesting, like we talk about polarization. When you drill down the polls of how people respond to taking a knee, it's very universal support amongst people of color. And it's really, the polarization is in the white community, where it's like 55, 45, 60, 40 against, but you're still reaching that 40%. And that's really important. The other 60%, that's where you get the trouble. I was doing an event like this with Professor Eddie Glaude, also from in Princeton, and Eddie Glaude said, Dave, one of the things that binds all these stories in the book is the threat of violence that hangs over these young people every time they engage in this act of nonviolent civil disobedience. And that really is quite staggering and stunning that, here in the 2000 teens into 2020 and 2021, there still is no culture in this country. I mean, I don't think there ever was a culture in this country, but it seems like we're so far away from it at this point, like where people can disagree without being disagreeable, or somebody can say, I think you're wrong, but let's talk about it. Or we should have a public forum where we debate the anthem, where we debate police brutality. But no, instead it's, I'm going to hurt you because you are making me think about things that I don't want to think about. And that's really toxic.
Well, it's what you talked about before, which I also loved your language. You talked about these things being baked into youth sports, and now we can bring voice to the white supremacy that's baked into adult sports, to competitive sports, to all the different leagues and all the different sports that we have. And with every piece of resistance we've seen, there's also been the much more vitriolic reaction to it.
Yeah.
Because you can't accept these things without accepting your both implicit and explicit participation in it.
Yeah, and I think it was Maya Angelou, I might get this very wrong, who said some variation of America loves Black culture, but not Black people. And you see that in sports, because what is sports in the United States without the Black athlete? What is sports in terms of its tradition and history without Michael Jordan, for goodness sakes? Someone who was not even a political athlete, but the poetry with which he brought to the game, is really unparalleled. And yet, despite this sometimes disturbingly intimate affection for Black athletes by the white public, you see, as soon as they start to speak about the experiences that shape their lives, a push away. And I remember when the first athletes of the Black Lives Matter movement started to speak out, the first professional athletes were members of the then St. Louis Rams, about 4 or 5 of them, who came out of the tunnel before a game, and they held their hands up in the hands up, don't shoot pose. And of course, doing that in St. Louis was really powerful because of Ferguson being so nearby, and Michael Brown had just been shot and killed. And one of the players, Kenny Britt, who, big shock, found himself out of the league a few years later, wrote on his uniform, "My children's lives matter." And that phrase, Black Lives Matter, was so new on people's tongue. I knew people might be familiar with that story of the players putting their hands up. I knew people who smuggled a massive banner into that stadium and unfurled it so the whole stadium could see. And it said, what did it say? It said, if you love Black players, you need to love Black life. And they were immediately kicked out of the stadium for such a seditious message. Can you believe that? People are about to watch the NFL, a sport that not only depends upon Black excellence and Black labor, but also depends so intimately, there's that word again, on the destruction of the Black body as part of its entertainment package. And having something that says you must love Black life was seen as too much for the stadium in St. Louis. And, the St. Louis fans booed them and cheered when they were taken away by security. And they didn't like that the players did that. But then look what happened in St. Louis. The franchise owner of that team, a real estate billionaire named Stan Kroenke, he moved the team to Los Angeles and stuck St. Louis with millions and millions of dollars in bills that the public taxpayers had to put up. So you have all these, to me, that's such a metaphor for life in the United States, where you have, white working class folks in St. Louis, booing the idea of appreciating Black life and treasuring Black life. And by doing so, they're really siding with Stan Kroenke. And then Stan Kroenke screws them over too and sticks them with a tax bill on the stadium, which is why, there used to be an old slogan that said racism chains both. Or you think of Frederick Douglass's line about, they separated both to conquer each. About, so you have this feeling of white supremacy and booing these players for caring about Black life. But, you're chained as well. You're conquered as well, because you're stuck with the bill when the billionaire takes it to LA.
Yeah, that brings up the very salient point of how much of this deals with racism, how much this deals with profit. That there's a huge component of the owners of these teams. They'll do whatever is going to be most profitable, even if they themselves are the most virulent racist in the world. They're gonna hire the Black player, the brown player, the person of color, the person who they may despise personally, if they can make them one more dollar. So often I think, how do we make it profitable for the owners and for the teams and for the folks who make the decisions, to understand that the embracing of these messages should not just be performative, but it should be something that is lasting.
I mean, that's going to have to come from the players themselves, because I think waiting for it to come from franchise owners without extraordinary pressure is sort of like asking a dog to meow. I mean, it's a species apart from them and how they operate, because, sometimes their racism and white supremacy does trump their desire to win. You look at just the few numbers of Black coaches and executives, the so-called thinking positions, that's what they call them, are almost exclusively helmed by white people. And that's one of the things that the Gruden emails really exposed, is like, okay, this is how these guys really think and operate. They love Black players for the victories, for the wins and the losses. But they also know that if you're a Black athlete, you're playing on a non-guaranteed contract, and you're only playing for 3.5 years. I did a book with Michael Bennett, a former NFL player. It was called "Things That Make White People Uncomfortable," and it was really about the National Football League and how it operates. And one of the things that Michael said is that among players, they say that NFL stands for either "not for long" or N-word for lease. That's how the players put it. And those jobs that you see, that, I mean, the black people are the face of the league in so many respects, but those are the jobs that only really last 3.5 years on average. If you're someone who's an executive, or heaven forbid, a franchise owner, I mean, that's generational wealth. That's something that, and you're around for decades, not 3.5 years. So the decades positions are still the province, really, of white supremacy and the institutionalized racism in the sport. And I think it's also very much linked to profit as well, as you said. I mean, this is that's how their world operates, and they operates on a very ruthless level. But you see this with Colin Kaepernick, because they made the decision that Colin Kaepernick actually has more value as a ghost story than as a player. I mean, here he is, this Super Bowl caliber quarterback who they deliberately blackballed, or as my co-radio host, Tom Thomas, likes to say, whiteballed, away from the sport, pushed out of the sport, because they decided he has this greater value as somebody who they can use as a ghost story and say to young players, you better watch it or you're going to end up like Colin Kaepernick.
I knew this hour to go too quickly, and I so enjoyed this conversation. And speaking of stories, I would love if you would allow our audience, I'd like you to finish with 2 stories. The first one I would love to hear, and I think our community would be really empowered by hearing of an athlete that maybe is not as well known, who took a stand at some point in history, that story has not been lifted, has not been amplified as much as you think, that has an import of value that has not been acknowledged. And then I'd like you to bring us home, because I think that it was really wonderful that you mentioned that the book, The Kaepernick Effect, is really more about youth taking stands. So I'd love you to share one of your favorite moments from the book, from one of the kids that you talked to that are making a difference in their community.
Sure. I mean, wow. I mean, on the first question, that's an easy one for me because I always like to raise up the name of Rose Robinson, otherwise known as Roseanne Robinson, who was really the first person. I mentioned Mahmoud Abdul Rauf as somebody who took a stand about not standing for the anthem, and then of course Colin Kaepernick and the effect that he had in terms of having hundreds and hundreds of people take a knee during the anthem. But the first person to ever do it was Roseanne Robinson, a track and field star, and she did it in 1959. I mean, if for folks who know stuff about left history, 1959 wasn't exactly a time of grand protest. It was actually a time where Dr. King and his cohorts were debating whether or not the movement was done. It was an actual debate. You'd had the Montgomery bus boycotts, you'd had all of that, but you hadn't had the sit-in movement yet, which started in 1960. As Bayard Rustin so incredibly saw that, and saw that kind of direct, peaceful, nonviolent direct action was going to be the future of the struggle. But Roseanne Robinson engaged in that before Greensboro, in that very kind of nonviolent direct action by refusing to stand for the anthem at the I believe I'm trying to remember what the game. I think the Pan Am Games. But I'd have to check that. And Roseanne Robinson became a lifelong fighter for a better world. She was imprisoned for refusing to pay taxes because she said they supported the Cold War, and she didn't believe in money going to armaments. So I like to hold up Roseanne Robinson's name, partly because it's also symbolic to me of the way the contributions of Black women so often do get overlooked and how this history gets shaped. I saw that you're having Dr. Keisha Blaine talking about Fannie Lou Hamer. I'm going to have to tune into that one because that's so symbolic to me of the stories that we need to know. I mean, and not just knowing the name Fannie Lou Hamer, but knowing the substance of her story. And Dr. Blaine is brilliant. So that's just going to be off the page amazing. It's going to make this look like a big pile of crap. But to take it now to one of the stories, there's so many, like asking me to choose out of these dozens of stories is tough. It's like if you ask me to choose my favorite, I don't want to say my favorite kid, but it is kind of like that because I feel close to all these people. So there's not one that I feel is necessarily more inspirational than another, but in my mind, I do always go to the story of this young man named Rodney Axon, who was really the first person to take a knee. And he did it just days after Colin Kaepernick did. When I say the first person, I mean the first person after Colin Kaepernick. And Rodney's story is so interesting and evocative of other stories in the book because Rodney was somebody who was fed up with racism on his football team in Brunswick, Ohio. He had teammates who were using the N-word. He was also watching these viral videos of people getting killed by police. He had to move because his family moved from Cleveland to a much more white suburban community in Brunswick, Ohio. And he was just fed up. He'd had enough. And when he was thinking of some way that he could express this and start a conversation in his community. And when he saw what Colin Kaepernick did, it just clicked with him. And he said, yes, that's what I'm going to do. And I think that's so important because people got to realize that all these people who took a knee, I mean, they didn't do it because they were inspired by Colin Kaepernick. They did it because Colin Kaepernick showed them a language by which they could express their own dissent. That's Colin Kaepernick's great contribution to the movement. But if you ask the young people, as I did, what inspired you to do this, they're more likely to mention Trayvon Martin than they are to mention Colin Kaepernick. You know, they talk about the people who've died at the hands of racism and why that stuck with them their whole lives. And that's remarkable because 2012 is when Trayvon was killed by George Zimmerman. So a lot of these young people were like 10, 11 years old when Trayvon was killed, and that marked them. It's like the civil rights activists who speak about Emmett Till, who was also 14 years old, and it marked them in a way that gave them calluses for the fires ahead. And Rodney Axon being that first person, I mean, to me, it's just such a story of courage in the face of resistance. And I think we need more of that courage today. And the hope is that people can read this book and find that courage within themselves.
Perfect. Thank you so much for bringing us home that way. This is the book we've been talking about. Not enough tonight, but because you got a taste of it, and now you know how important it is. This is the Kaepernick effect, taking a changing the world. And it's really about the youth and how they can really bring it forward. And the link is right there in the comment section. Bookshop.org supports local independent bookstores. So please do click that link, support Dave, support independent bookstores, and buy one for yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I really want people to know this, that because it fits with the mission of the center. Any money that I make from this book, any of it, is going straight to this organization called Serve Your City DC. That's a mutual aid organization that works with youth, because it didn't feel right for me to profit off of their courage. You know, that just felt wrong. So Serve Your City is a brilliant mutual aid group. They are going to be giving out free copies of the book to the young people that they serve. That was their idea, which I certainly, I treasure that idea, because it's this idea of paying it forward and planting those seeds. People can look them up, serveyourcitydc.org. But that's just part of the mission. You know what I'm saying? It's like we got to keep paying it forward.
You are a pretty damn cool guy. So go buy one for yourself, buy one for a friend, buy one for an enemy who will become a friend. Buy one for your local school district, or a few for them to have them on the shelves for their student athletes so they can be inspired. And although we want everyone to buy a book, we know that some people can't afford to buy books, and their local library is their conduit for these ideas. So you call your local library as well, please, and you say, hey, do you have a copy of the Kaepernick Effect on your shelves? And if they don't, you say, as a patron, I beseech you to get one. I cannot thank you enough, my friend. I was looking forward to this, and this was more than I expected, and I was expecting a lot. So well done indeed. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing your energy and your spirit. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for showing us that sports is not something we have to be afraid of, or that we can let go of that high school trauma of gym class. It's all very meaningful, from the higher platform of athletes taking a knee to our kids at their local level, making their signs of protest, and for all of us in between who now can embrace sports a little closer. We appreciate that as well. Thank you, my friend. Keep on keeping on.
Thank you, sir.
All right. We'll see you soon. So everybody, that is what a great book. Please do go buy a copy. Go buy a copy right now. You can do it, and you can do it for friends and for family and for your local library as well, please. What a great conversation. What an inspirational moment. This is what the Power Hour is all about. This is the epitome of what we try to accomplish in these virtual conversations, in these meaningful online communions, and we cannot thank you all for joining us. It means the world. So please do come back. As I said, we are here every freaking weeknight, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Please come back and be here. We are here for you. Please be with us. Until tomorrow night, much love and respect, y'all. Be good to each other. Be good to your families, chosen or otherwise. And most especially, my friends, be good to yourselves. You need it, and we need you here with us.
We need in community a group of angelic troublemakers.